2, 1. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Keiju Combat here this month. We are going to be talking about a phenomenally large 60-meter tall turtle called Gamera in a movie called Gamera the Giant Monster that was filmed in 1965. It was directed by Noriaki Yuasa, or Yuasa. Yuasa. And it was put out by not Toho, but it was kind of in response to Godzilla and to compete with Godzilla. From Dai Studios, if I remember correctly. So, just before we go into first impressions, I'm just going to state what IMDb tells us about this film. From out of the Arctic comes a gigantic, flying, fire-breathing turtle that sets its sights on destroying Tokyo. So, first impressions start as of now, and since let's start with you, Mo. How did you get introduced into this destructive creature?
I saw it definitely when I was fairly young. Not as young as Godzilla. I feel like Gamera came a few years later, and I know that definitely Gamera versus Giran is one of the first ones that I saw, because I remember that like knife monster chopping off Gauss's head. This one I don't think I saw till a few years later, and it might have been maybe the MST3K one or just the American version on TV. Mostly my real first impression of the Gamera movies came when I just kept getting shitty multi-packs and then noticed wow, I have a lot of these turtle movies, and I just started getting drunk and watching them and fell in love with them. There's something about Gamera. Well, he's a turtle. You like turtles too, so you know what that's about. And I think it took me until more recently to appreciate it all as more than just a straight up Godzilla ripoff. I mean, there's obviously the clear stuff that they just straight up robbed from it, but I guess I would say my first impression of old Gam was strong, man. He's a little too nice to those kids, though. I'd have thrown that little bastard right off of that lighthouse.
When you say Gam, it makes me think you're talking about a giant grandmother or something.
He is kind of the grandmother too. He is a friend to all children. We grew up with his tutelage.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
so, Mo, you know all the kaiju movies. Have they had one with a giant grandmother laying waste to the city?
Not to my knowledge, but they need to. Well, no.
Yeah, they really do.
Dead Alive. Dead Alive has the giant kaiju grandma at the end, remember? The Peter Jackson movie? So it has been done, just not in a Japanese movie. It's got a big old set on it.
Well, and there was...
I remember.
Well, there was Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, but that wasn't an elderly woman. But still, it
should have been.
And Brandon would know. Brandon would know if I'm remembering. Brandon would know if I'm remembering correctly here. But wasn't it the Oedipus Rex part of New York Stories with the giant ghost of the mother in the sky?
Oh yeah.
Yes, that was fun.
Sky Mommy sounds pretty badass.
Basically just like
of course, there is also Attack of the Titans, the live action films with those gigantic Silver Surfer looking dudes.
No massive Mimas.
I'm sorry, I can't right now. I can't hear Silver Surfer without thinking about.
And of course, you cannot forget the massive nanny-looking thing with a vacuum in space and Spaceballs. So.
Mega Maid.
She's gone from.
I would say that's almost Keiju.
So
What?
whose first impression are we on?
We are
Whoever's
going
not
to
me.
go with you, Brandon. Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit? Was this your first time watching Gamera?
In a sense, yes, because it depends on what Gamera you're talking about. Now, when you're
Gamera
talking
the
about
Giant
Gamera the Giant Monster,
Yes.
yes, this is my very first time watching this version. I am familiar with the original, with part of the original source material from the American release Gamera the Invincible, which I was introduced to through Mystery Science Theater 3000. I was a huge fan in the 90s. So I'm sure in the early 90s, like 92, 93, I was introduced to it for the first time. And of course, the one that I remember the most is the one, I think it's the wackier other ones they covered, like the one where it shows like the turtle doing somersaults around the pole and
I think that's Gamera
various
versus
things.
Giran. He does the
Yeah.
loop
Gamera
This,
was a pole dancer.
for a time.
Oh, okay.
Knowing that those movies went from Godzilla clones, actually, I kind of cloned it there because Godzilla got a little bit wacky after a while too, but not quite like Gamera did. And
He never pole danced for Martians, that's for sure.
when I got a hold of the set, I'm one of the few lucky ones apparently, got a hold of it. I was like, I've got to watch it finally in the original, and I could say that the difference between Gamera the Invincible and Gamera the Giant Monster is much like Godzilla, but I'd be lying because I feel like that's a move. I felt like my first impression was, well, maybe this is going to be like a much deeper movie, much like
No.
Gojira was. Then I listened to it, I was like, no.
No, but it was a darker
No.
story.
Oh, it was fun, but I really don't think the American, I don't think that I got anything more out of the Japanese than I did the American release, which was
Nah.
very different from the Godzilla.
I feel like in terms of their tone and the quality of Gamera, you could say that the quality is similar between the two, but yeah, it's pretty far off in terms of that
But
stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like seeing that giant turtle walking on its hind legs. Like, that's unnatural, really. But I don't know. There's something about it that's just entertaining and just fun in general.
Let's go with you, Jake. What were your first impressions of the Gamera the Giant Monster film?
Well, I have to admit, this is something that I knew by name. And I had a little bit of the reputation, but it was never really fully on my radar. I had never seen any of these movies. I had always been kind of like, it's out there. I know Mo's been talking them up lately, and I was getting more and more curious. And I want that set, but I could not, even before I knew that it was an impossibility. I was like, I can't justify that price tag on that particular set. I can't do it. Now, I would love to because it's awesome, but still. But I ended up watching they have it posted on YouTube. A slight difference in price there. And I watched it, and I was very generally entertained. It was cheesy as all hell. Acting was incredibly interesting. Some of them looked like they were having a lot of fun with their roles. They really did. They looked like they were having fun, so that was good. It honestly did not leave a huge impact on first viewing. I'll have to give it again. I give it another go one of these days, and I'll definitely have to try and get hold of it because it was entertaining. But my first impression was generally good.
That's fair. You got to hit like Gamera versus Gauss before you really realize like, oh, this is something a little different. This isn't just Godzilla.
Goodness.
Just quick note before we move on to Dane here. Even if you missed out on the Gamera set, they do have 2 volumes on Blu-ray that you can collect the
Mhm.
Showa series on. And then they also have a trilogy pack on Blu-ray for the Heisei series. So you're not
So-
out of luck if you missed the Arrow set. You can fairly cheaply collect those last time I checked. So I think
Yeah.
I just got an email about one of them going
Yeah,
down in
those are
price.
those are
earlier.
that's the Mill Creek releases that they did.
Yep.
And I've seen
Yeah.
those prices like that. That those were the ones I was gonna get before the Arrow set, and then I did pre-order the Arrow set, and then with my there you go, yeah, with my unemployment, you know, well, being on unemployment number one, but then with the the benefits being pretty paltry in North
Mhm.
Carolina, and the extra 400 not having taken effect yet, even though there is the word that they got formal approval and that kind of stuff. So I'm really hoping that they get trickled down here pretty soon. Preferably, again, I like to get another job, so because I had to cancel that pre-order. But
Mhm.
like you said, your copy, I guess, didn't show up. So and there was just too many pre-orders relative to what Amazon was able to support. So I don't feel too bad about it. Plus, like Jake said, I having not seen any Gamera films prior to now, I couldn't. Looking back on it, I was like, I can afford to be without this for the foreseeable future. Um, just because, again, I'm trying to penny pinch, but also I'm trying to hold off on some of those bigger things until I have some more, money to burn, basically. But yeah, I saw this one finally. I knew about Gamera and never really took the plunge in the same way that I had with Godzilla, and largely that was because in the 90s when I was a kid and when Blockbuster was largely the only video store that that I knew of until like the very end of my time in California. And at that time, the best that Blockbuster had was like the newest, most mainstream things, and you were lucky that they had anything that was remotely old. So I saw what they had of Godzilla, and I do not recall them having had any Gamera films. And obviously, there weren't a whole lot of other venues to find them and that kind of stuff. And I mean, their selection of Godzilla films was already quite limited anyway, so you can imagine the very low probability of finding anything.
Mill Creek on some of their 50 whatever movie sets had at least 3 of them out
Yeah,
where they actually. I think they had what was it the U.S. version of this War of the Monsters and I think they had Destroy All Planets, which was part of the Godzilla
yeah.
the Gamera set. So some of these were filtered into them sets way before that Gamera set that you held up, Mo. Um,
Yeah, well, I'm talking about even before. I'm talking about even before DVD, like when I would have been in my prime time for kaiju interest. And I know that there are a lot of people that are like our age who are, remain really, really into kaiju stuff, or now with the internet and with DVDs and Blu-rays and streaming and stuff, now we've got the resources with which to catch up on all these different things that we might have missed. And that's kind of where I find myself. So that's why I hadn't seen any Gamera until now, except despite having had this one book called Monster Madness, not related to Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, but the same title. And actually, it was dated at around 1998, but it had a lot of pictures of these old movies that was really what introduced me to a lot of them, some of which were in wider circulation in mainstream store like Blockbuster than others. But Gamera was in there, and so I made sure to research Gamera. But I mean, it just wasn't. Gamera still doesn't have quite the mainstream brand name recognition that even Godzilla has, despite most Americans, at least, knowing the basic premise of Godzilla. you mention Gamera to most people, and they'll be like, "What?"
Mhm.
And so I was glad to finally see this, having the ability to see it. But as far as the movie itself, I enjoyed it. It was definitely less somber than Godzilla, the Japanese original version of that. But I wouldn't say it was totally camptastic either, because the Cold War themes were pretty strong, but it's also a more, I think, optimistic story relative to Godzilla, because it shows um, the Americans and the Soviet Union and the Japanese all working together to solve this problem. And it's like, hey, look at that. It's like we can cooperate, we can come together to solve real problems. And so, I mean, it's a little bit more optimistic in its orientation, even though Gamera as a creature, compared to, well, that original Godzilla, not any of the later incarnations or offspring or whatever. It seems like Gamera, just as a creature, is a lot stronger and a lot more resilient in terms of, the fact that it is an energy machine. Basically, it'll absorb any kind of energy, nuclear, petroleum, fire, anything that comes at it. And so what do? The best that they can do is shoot it off into space, which they didn't do for Godzilla in the well, at least not in the first one. I mean, Godzilla has gone to space then, because of course he has. But it's just, I think that there's an interesting juxtaposition of a more optimistic but still politically aware kind of worldview, mixed with a monster that can do more than Godzilla, and I would say is harder to kill than even Godzilla was, because like they didn't have the oxygen destroyer here, which that on it as a killing device, I think that's still one of the more brilliant ones out there. But
No,
then also
in
with this, the best that they got is to shoot.
in
Oh
fact,
no,
to
they got
me,
the. Okay.
go ahead, Brandon.
Go ahead, David.
Oh
I
well,
was just. Actually, I'll just say it quick and I'll pass it on. Well, they did get an awfully quick approval to use an atomic bomb on it. I mean, the guy's like,
They did.
"Hey, can you Americans like launch a nuke at it?" Okay.
Mhm.
well,
Which that definitely tells you that. Well, again, that's partially, I think you could chalk it up to the movie's kind of spirit of cooperation. You're right that how the tables have turned, because Godzilla was all about trying to heal from those wounds of the atomic age, and having been on the receiving end of the only nuclear warheads ever dropped, or the nuclear bombs ever used in actual wartime on civilian targets and everything. And then here it's like, oh hey, can you can you nuke this thing? Thanks, which but that kind of well, what they would have called the triad of deterrence. That's what the term that was used subsequently. In the later stages of the Cold War, that whole thing, and the whole communicating with allied nations and having the survey stations so that you can detect this threat or that threat from thousands of miles away, and then you can do what you need to do before it ever reaches U.S. shores, etc., etc. That was starting to, I think, get the beginning stages of that. I think were kind of getting implemented at this point in the Cold War, particularly because of the threats that like the Soviet Union faced. But even then, they get the Soviets on their side, which is like, oh wow, they're. I mean, Gamera really is that much of a threat that even the U.S. and the Soviets are coming together, and it's like, holy shit, Godzilla 84, 85, they wouldn't have done that. I mean, the re-edit, was such that the Soviets, whatever they did, they shot down the thing. But yeah, it's just, I found that interesting, but also it does speak to that kind of the policy of what became known as containment. From that was like that post World War II allied nations coming together to contain, well, communism, but also contain and hopefully kind of squash down the proliferation of nuclear weapons and that kind of stuff. And so, in that same spirit, you see these nations that may or may not, especially like in the Soviet Union, may or may not come together. They are coming together to face this threat that poses a threat to the entire human race. And yet, Gamera isn't really a villain. If anything, it's more animal like in terms of it trying to get food, as the kid points out. And it's not really malicious or anything because it saves the child.
But they're taking it as no matter which monster movie you have, he's always a threat. No matter whether it's Godzilla or Gamera, they're just going to take it as a threat, and we have to destroy the bastard. So.
Well, that's always the way that they go about it, because, well, would you expect them to react any other way? No. I mean, the only exception to that are some of the 70s Godzilla ones where Godzilla like an explicit protector of the earth and things like that, which that's a different thing, because then Godzilla is a little bit more like a superhero in that respect. And that's why I made the analogy before about Godzilla sort of being like Japan's Superman in a way.
I mean, Japan. Oh, go ahead, Dave. You get your first impression before we.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do. My first impressions of this film is I remember seeing the Gamera, the Invincible, earlier on in life, but it wasn't until I picked up the Gamera Legacy set that Mo was showing earlier, I got that about 8 years ago, and we did a marathon, my fiance and I, at the time, because we both got the set. We were like hyped about it because it was like $8, brand new. So we were like, shit, we can do a marathon here. What I thought was interesting is that Gamera started in the film because an unknown aircraft. We don't know what it was even throughout the whole entire film. It could have been Russia, but it was an unknown aircraft that, because they didn't answer, we, the Americans, shot those planes down, and their cargo had atomic bombs. Now, when we shot them down, the atomic bombs hit Antarctica, and boom! Now we got Gamera crawling out of the cracks. So that is why Gamera.
Yeah, it was the Arctic, and geographically speaking, I think that's important because given who was a nuclear power at the time and geographically where they're located, more than likely it's probably Russia, even though they don't want to say that, unlike Godzilla 84. But just time and place wise, I would imagine it's probably the Soviet Union.
Well,
but,
around that time, I believe that they were still talking about X-planes and all that jazz, in like some of the popular mechanic magazines and shit like that, So
actually,
yeah, well, the 50s and 60s, those were all about like the next waves of top secret tech, and certainly in the United States because of some of the declassified Area 51 documents that came out not long ago was kind of saying what we already knew, which was that Area 51 was indeed a top secret aircraft testing facility specifically for stealth fighter technology, which I believe was started around that time. And so naturally you have this unmarked plane, so it's like, well, maybe, the Soviets were working on something similar, or, it's not too much of a stretch.
Now, to piggyback on that, actually they did do their homework a bit, which is interesting. And I did take Mo's advice and say, well, you got that luckily enough. You should be enjoying all those special features. So I did. One of the things that I found out about it that was interesting about those scenes is one, the fact that they actually did get accurate representation of the American planes that would be in that area of the world and the potential designs of bombers that might be going through the area from an opposing country. So they did do their studies. But something else that's kind of funny is the American actors, using quotey fingers for that, the way that they were able to get them. I was like, man, I wish I would be, if I was alive at the time, I would have loved to have just been vacationing in the right place at the right time. Because they'd
Right.
either pull them off of military bases, so some of them are legit military, or they pull them out of hotel lobbies, like, hey, want to be in a movie?
Yeah.
Which is like just, that's great.
Well, I mean, they're like, oh, they speak English. Who cares? You know, which I
Right.
mean, that's the that's always the amusing thing about. There are actually a lot of interesting parallels between this movie and Shin Godzilla in terms of like the geopolitical kind of relying on should we or shouldn't we rely on the Americans to help us solve this problem thing. But in both
Mhm.
movies, you have a surprising amount of English spoken by like
Mhm.
American actors, and they both, to a certain extent, they both have some not as bad as this actually compared to Shin Godzilla, but you had some of that kind of awkward, stilted dialogue, even though those are clearly native English. Those are clearly native English speakers, and they're speaking, perfectly grammatically correct sentences. But it's just clear that the direction they were given was such that they got this undecided vocal tone in their delivery,
Yeah.
and they're like, I don't know exactly how they want this. Okay, and you
It's-
saw a little bit of that here, but it wasn't
Oh,
quite
dude.
as noticeable.
It's also,
I thought.
You see a
There'll
lot
be-
of it in like the Heisei Godzilla movies. There is some, you can tell they just told the dude, like, it's English, just read it, like no direction at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm reminded of the scene, and I'm sure most of you have seen Lost in Translation. So you got the scene where
Yeah.
Bill Murray's filming the whiskey commercial, and this
Yeah.
this director goes on and on and on and on and on, and the translator's like, he says, "Smile and look at the camera," or something like that. Are you sure that's everything he said? Does it seem like he said more than that?
Well, I mean,
But-
that is kind of that is a funny thing about language in general, is that some languages they will take an extremely long time to communicate what to us would be a relatively simple idea, and vice versa.
Right.
It just depends on the language. But yeah, I like that scene too, and I liked it when they talk about James Bond and they referred to Roger Moore and not Sean Connery. Even
I feel like they were-
though I like Roger
they
Moore
were
fine.
pitching I feel like they were pitching Suntory, but I can't remember for sure.
Well,
I
It's a
can't
good
remember
way.
either, but it was just a funny little exchange because of the quite literally the lost in translation language, but also just culturally.
I'll have more to say on that on Shin Godzilla, definitely, because there was some notes on that.
And
Shortly
talking about, oh, go ahead.
shortly after that X-plane went down with the atomic bombs, and after Gamera awakens, there just so happens to be a Japanese expedition nearby with a Dr. Hidaka and his assistant Kyuko and a reporter whose name is Oyagi. And they are given a stone tablet by an Eskimo chief who explains that this monster is called Gamera.
Mhm.
And then, of course, he destroys the expedition ship and escapes. So, what do you guys think about those Eskimo scenes there?
I don't think we're supposed to call them
Well,
Eskimos
if we're-
anymore, but
Yeah. Well, but they
Just
did
different
call them out in
times.
the movie.
That's
We'll
the thing
give
that
them
always
That's
jumps right
what I
out at
was-
me is like,
Well, that's what I was wondering because Eskimo, from what I recall, are well, they're Arctic, obviously Arctic people, but I recall
Right.
them specifically being like Alaska or like the northern territories of Canada, things like that. And even then, they have more proper subdivisions of the different names
Right.
that they have, so they're not all kind of lumped in together. But I think if we're talking about Russia specifically, that'd be Siberia proper, you know.
Yeah,
Right.
So I don't know
that'd
if you'd
probably be
say
closer.
Siberians or there would inevitably be
Yeah.
some other name. But
I
yeah, the Eskimo thing, I
IMDb.
was like that would if they were actual. Go ahead.
I was gonna say IMDb does list them as Eskimo chiefs, so it's
Yeah.
a widespread gaffe apparently.
Well, I mean, you got to keep in mind that it's
Yeah.
like, oh, they're people that are living in cold weather, Eskimo. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's just a general
at that
thing.
time, it was just a shorthand, I guess.
Well, I mean, and keep in mind that
But that did
the
kind
Japanese
of jump out at me.
the Japanese culture was not immune to racial stereotypes,
Oh,
just because they weren't
it's
American.
frequent in kaiju movies, frequent. They
Yeah,
do it to themselves in kaiju movies all the
they
time.
do. Well, the Japanese, their post. It's an interesting thing. The Japanese and their like post World War II attitudes towards race, at least within their own borders, is that
Mhm.
on their like official census and everything, they just each other just Japanese with no subdivisions of any kind, even though like like actual like cultural anthropologists and things like they will be like, there's you could afford to subdivide a little bit more than what you're doing, but they're like, no,
Yeah, I
just
think
straight
there's
Japanese.
three
And
different races in Japan, technically. Something like that. I
exactly.
saw a
Well,
little
and
doc about it once.
exactly. Well, and that's meant to counteract the fact that in the imperial era that they thought of themselves as the superior Asian race, and therefore they could
Yeah.
conquer Korea and
Right.
China and all that stuff.
Well,
So I
and
mean,
a lot of
it's meant to
their
counteract all of that.
stereotypical language in these movies comes across very much as like maybe them trying to be a little too agreeable and make everything too understandable to other audiences. So they use some words sometimes that is like, yeah, I get that that's probably what people elsewhere call it Japan, but maybe
Oh yeah.
Well,
maybe
apparently, per Wikipedia, Eskimo is a catch-all term, but it is considered outdated by most people. Inuit refers to most North Americans, and Yupik refers to most Siberians and some Alaskans. And then you also have the Aleut, which are basically southern Alaska. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just
Yeah.
a people of the North kind of thing. I don't know that it's
Yeah.
problematic. They removed it off the Eskimo pies, though.
Yeah. Well,
Hey.
I mean, and if you look at it like evolutionary wise, they are, they went across that same bridge,
Hey,
however many billion years ago. But
in all likelihood, they probably rode Gamera across it, dude.
Exactly. Well, he was a part of their culture there, so yeah.
I mean, dude could fly.
Well,
You get what I'm saying.
yeah, I mean, if they got the hieroglyphics or whatever of him, then he's probably like they said he was around long ago. But interesting that they referenced Plato as well. I mean, and that was an interest. So you got a lot of what we would now say a lot of multiculturalism in here, where you've got Japan, America, Soviet Union, you got Eskimo / Siberia / whatever we want to say. We got Plato referred in there. It's like this is really they're trying to make this as international of a threat as possible, which that's kind of again that's an interesting thing when compared to Godzilla, which that was a pretty explicitly like Japanese event. Godzilla coming to shore and all that stuff. Like that was a very explicitly Japanese event, and that is how it was interpreted and how it was handled. And then here it's a lot more of like an interconnected world, and one where people of all different political stripes can come together to try and, take care of this thing.
A lot of
Keep in
token whites in the
mind-
Gamera movies. I'll just say that. But he's a friend to all children,
Yeah,
not just the
exactly.
Japanese,
Yeah.
right?
Well, keep
know,
in
that
mind
one-
the time it came out. I mean, Godzilla came out like in the 50s, like just after the moratorium was lifted, like the American basically censorship that we had been imposing upon them had been lifted. So they had a lot more to say in general about the struggle. I think Gamera came out in what, the mid 60s?
Yeah.
65.
So yeah, I mean, so it had been at least 10 years since they've had free form ability to speak their minds at the time after the war had ended. So there was a lot more of a different. I mean, I could say there was a different way of thinking. I mean, shoot, a whole new crop of younger people into the game. I mean,
Well,
you gotta
that
keep in
and,
mind. I mean, this was on the back of a giant rat movie.
Yeah. Well, and
John Tron
I
the
made the
movie?
joke in the I made the joke in the chat about, so this movie came out in 65, and I made the joke because there's a scene in there with the kids dancing in the rock club, and it's very like clearly kind of like British invasion influenced that kind of sound, and that was in the same year as when Beatles did their famous concert at Budokan, which that was like a big deal. I mean, because obviously they did the British invasion to the United States, and that was not really done prior to them. And then, of course, all the various English bands came over, and then them going all the way to Japan. That just showed what an international reach they had, and the fact that Japan was like okay with importing Western culture like a lot more than they ever before, even after they had kind of forcibly had their ports open to the Americans. But like, point is like there was a new attitude of like, okay, so they have like comparatively more like Western dress. They've got, this similar style of music. They've let in the biggest band in the world to perform, and it's in English, but they know all the words, though a lot of them probably don't necessarily know what they all mean. But it's like, that also signals that new generation, that new world that can come together to hopefully tackle a problem like this.
You could say even like on every level of this, there's certain seeds of what's going on in like Shin Godzilla politically, what's kind of happening in just the kaiju movement all together with this, because 64 65 was a huge year for new kaiju movies that weren't Godzilla also. So.
Well,
It
and
was,
just,
and then also that go ahead.
well, I was going to say briefly, not just Shin Godzilla, which again we'll be talking more about that shortly, but I don't know that we really talked all that much last week about how Godzilla 2014 and King of the Monsters had a far more international vibe than pretty much anything that is typically thought of with Godzilla. Like 2014 starts with a disaster in Japan, and one of the main characters is Japanese.
Right.
But beyond that,
Well,
it's very much an international. Well, that one was very much there's a big scene in the Philippines, and it's basically U.S. and Japan. But the second one's like worldwide, so it's like it is interesting to see that sort of, as you said, maybe like some of the seeds for that as well in these earlier ones.
They played with it a little bit in Return of Godzilla or Godzilla 84. Like you have the Americans and like the Russians on the council. They're doing the whole council thing a bunch, like in Shin Godzilla.
Well,
they've toyed with it, but they went hard with it.
I can the American Godzilla thing. I think it was largely because, those are Warner Brothers movies. They got a shitload of money thrown in there, and the more international you can make a big budget movie, then the better it's going to play in these various countries and territories and things. But I do also think that like they do acknowledge the Japanese origins of the character
Yeah.
crisis of these things. They acknowledge it, but
Yeah.
you're right. They do open the scope a lot
Mhm.
more, partially because, well, it's Godzilla is not an American character, never has been,
Right.
never will be, but also if these things really did, and it really would be a worldwide problem, especially given that we've got the UN and we've got, the internet,
Yeah.
all these things that we didn't have, in generations past. But
Mhm.
but again, Shin Godzilla, again, like it does have a little bit of that international angle, but it is still very much considered like a Japanese problem,
Oh,
and
yeah.
a Japanese problem to fix. And that's what's kind of unique here is that um, it just so happens that this creature is well, it originates in the Arctic,
Mhm.
but it's coming down their way, but it is not like a exclusively or a uniquely Japanese problem. If anything, like you said,
Mhm.
it had more of the roots in like the Eskimo slash Siberian
Mhm.
slash whatever we want to call
Right.
them, culture,
Part of my
and
point too
possibly
was more
across
towards
other.
that, like the younger guard was taken over too, so it wasn't just about the
Yeah.
international thing.
Mhm.
Well, and
Bringing it back
then you
around to
think
that
that
Beatles topic, missed opportunity to
oh,
have them grow into
well,
actual Beetles
Oh
and fight
yeah.
Gamera.
yeah. Now, well,
That'd have been fucking
we'll
awesome.
get to that, but very quickly, what's an interesting point of comparison is, so you got the young people in this movie, the 6'5", then you jump ahead 50 years to Shin Godzilla, they would have been like, or people of that generation, they would have been the establishment, and then because that whole movie is about young people coming
Getting
together
pissed
in
off at that
this.
red tape.
Well,
So
yeah,
we'll talk a lot about that.
that is about young people coming
Mhm.
together to kind of be able to act in a way the national and international systems haven't been able to act in order to solve these problems. So, I mean, there is a generational
Yeah.
thing too. But yeah, if the joke I was making in the chat was that I thought it would have been funny if they could have, which they could have never facilitated this, but in the movie in my head. Said, okay, the Beatles are playing at Budokan. Here comes Gamera, around, and it's like, "Oi, is that a giant turtle?" No, you just took too much acid pull, and it's like, the
Yes.
movie in my brain that went down, but then we throw in your thing with if they
Yeah.
turned into giant actual
Very,
beetles and
very
fought
Yeah.
Gamera.
And
Now you got a movie.
and there already is. They've already done part of the casting with Godzilla 2014. 'Cause, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe Aaron Taylor Johnson did play John Lennon. So
In
you've got
in which movie? Not familiar.
Nowhere Boy.
But I. Oh, okay. Yeah,
This could
I'm
still
familiar with
happen.
him and his
Okay?
work.
Still
It
possible.
could. We should.
Exactly.
Hey, let's get a Kickstarter together. Let's make it happen.
Let's do it. Even if we got a robot chicken
Because
that
I
said it
mean the
needs to
Beatles
happen.
are. Yeah, well, I mean the Beatles are.
Right.
I mean the copywriting of the music and stuff would make it such that you probably couldn't use an actual Beatles song, but like the Beatles themselves are historical figures, so I mean you could do that, and who knows what they get the secret of the, and then they become giant
So,
giant mutant Beatles, and they fight.
Oh, yeah.
so when Gamera gets over to the coast, as he's traveling, is that when we were introduced first to our hero of the story, the little kid?
Are you freaking
Well-
kidding me? He's the villain of the city. He almost gets multiple people
What's his
killed.
name? Toshio? Or whatever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Gets
I wanted
sightings
to.
of flying
Oh.
saucers.
The little
Oh yeah,
kid
because of
that
the drunk
turtles.
farmer that saw the flying saucer at the beginning.
Yeah.
First,
Actually,
Japan gets sightings of UFOs.
yeah.
So that's kind of cool. Where and then you realize that it's Gamera later. So it's kind of like
It's a cool little tidbit though. The guy talks about like, oh, those must be those UFOs they're talking about, and that was like a big boom time for UFOs. But what were you gonna say about that little shithead, Brandon?
Well, I also wanted to say about the UFOs. Have you noticed that Gamera had two methods of flight?
He does.
One that was more of a streamlined animated cut, and the other where he would do the like little fire out of each of the things where he's whirling around. But as far as like the kid, when they introduced the kid and his love of turtles, now what's interesting about this is I love the commentator, because the person who did the commentary introduces him as a psychotic narcissist.
Probably true.
And in a way,
That
it's kind
is
of true
funny.
because this kid is avoiding. There's a deleted scene apparently where it shows these kids are trying to introduce themselves to him. Like, no, I want to think about turtles. That's all he wants to do. Which is why that prompts the teacher coming in and saying, "I'm concerned about this kid."
Dude, his parents probably should have
would
considered
have been-
keeping the turtle and getting rid of him.
Well, that would
you
have
know what I
been
mean?
that would have been better to. Well, that would have been introduced. I was gonna actually two things. Yeah, like what you were saying. Maybe this kid's like a proto furry, except with turtles. But the second thing is that actually would have been a good scene to include, because as it is in the film now, it looked like his relatives were just being dickheads and taking away his turtles, and I was like,
Oh yeah.
I hate that in to be honest, like I hate that in movies when the adults just arbitrarily decide to take away someone's love and their passion just because it's weird or it's whatever, instead of like encouraging it, but also saying, well, you should also do this and that. It's why I hated King Triton so much in The Little Mermaid, because he does the exact same thing to Ariel's collection. Like, he destroys that shit, and I hated him for it. And it's like, no wonder she fucking went to Ursula, you dipshit. And it's like,
Well, in
same thing here. Only,
In hindsight, with little kid running through disaster areas and putting people's lives at risk, it's probably a good thing they took away the turtle. They should have done it a lot sooner.
That's a dumbass.
I don't know if they let him
that's
his
a
turtle,
dumbass
he
kid
might
right
have
there. If
stayed
you got,
in his room.
I don't know. He's a turtle
that's my
maniac,
point.
man.
It's like, what the. Well, but what think about that is, like, if that kid these days would not be so unusual, especially if if anything these days, parents would probably encourage it as opposed to just getting introduced to porn at age 10 in his room and that kind of stuff, because more kids these days are in their rooms on their computers or in video games or whatever. It's like, hey, he's got a real hobby in the real world. Encourage it, and it's scientific too.
You don't know what he's doing with that turtle.
Yeah, that little weirdo too. Even if that was the route he took, it probably would have just been turtle porn, anyways.
It might have been. I mean, that's why I said that's why I said he's like a proto furry, but with turtles.
Well, see, the thing is
that go ahead.
Can use this getting rid of the turtles analogy in the same place as parents that got rid of rock and roll from their kids.
Yeah,
in the 80s. So
that's just the quickest way to push, or in the 60s, because we're in the 60s.
Well, the thing
same thing. But the point, like, you do that to a kid, and all you're doing is ensuring that you have just driven this massive wedge between you and your child.
The thing with Toshio is
you created your own worst enemy.
I'm coming in there with a green bag, and everything is disappearing.
Hey, no. Okay, the thing with Toshio is collecting small creatures is actually not abnormal at all in Japan. It's not even weird back then. No, it's a fairly common hobby.
Where do you think?
They took him away because he was weird about it, bro. Okay, it's not because the hobby's weird. It's because he's a fucking little weirdo.
Where do you think Pokemon came from, as far as like capturing little creatures and things like that? I mean, there is a precedent for it, and it's not just. But I mean, kids have collected bugs and creatures
running through train stations as they're blowing up.
It's like a recent When They Cried discussion we ran. It's like, oh, it's so cute. I want to take it home. No, you can't. American person. Anyone remember Elmira?
Well, there is
happiness. So.
Well, there is the kawaii culture of Japan as well, about cuteness and stuff. That's mostly like cat girls and stuff. But I mean, the point is like they have a whole word and a whole
Mhm.
subculture devoted to cuteness. But then
Mhm.
like but yeah, kids have been collecting bugs and small creatures since the beginning of time. But like as
just-
far as like this kid defying all logic and safety and stuff, like I mean
he was
you
doing
got
some
yourself a dumbass
1960s
kid.
Pokemon Go shit right there. Like those people that were wandering
Yeah.
off cliffs because of
Or
Pokemon
like
Go. That's Toshio right there.
and,
just
and this
with the
well,
turtle.
and this is a weird comparison, but if this was the 80s or 90s and you replace Gamma with Michael Jackson and the kid's like
Oh my
running
gosh.
after him because like you remember in Moonwalker it was the same
The
kind of
game, yeah.
situation and Michael Jackson could transform into a giant robot in that one. So
Oh man, it's funny you said that. I'm pretty sure it was the commentary for King of the Monsters where they were talking about doing a Free Willy version. And then you mentioned Michael
Yeah.
Jackson. And I'm just thinking like the kid on the levee going like this and Gamera flying over.
Honestly, dude, I remember the Michael Jackson song with the
Yeah.
Save the Whales
Yeah,
donation
yeah,
thing at the
exactly.
beginning more than I do like the song if it was in the movie anywhere.
Yeah, it's
So to go with the
will you be
plot
there?
with
Yeah.
this,
Hey,
there are
you
two
got it.
things
I got it.
wanted
You
to-
if it was in the 90s, you could put in Earth Song in there and do your Free Willy thing. Then you got it all. You got all the bases covered.
Well, it is important though that they did want him to throw out Pee-wee, which is actually funny because if you look at both and you listen to Gamera the Invincible, they changed the name of the turtle to Tibby. But if you listen to the Japanese, when he's saying Pee-wee, it does sound very much like Tibby. And of
It
course,
does.
if you watch Mystery Science Theater, Tom Servo sings an entire love song to Tibby, the turtle.
Aw,
Which
that's cute.
is kind of funny. It's worth watching the episode just because it has some insight into what's. So they do surprisingly a long amount of research before they do those shows. Like later on when they're talking about it, and I'm going to come back to that as we go. But this one, though, it is important because him having to stash the turtle, building him a little house on the beach, when he runs into Gamera, just like a little bit later, which is funny because he's just sitting there looking at the grass, and you see Gamera come up behind him in that big old shot like Godzilla did in the original movie. And then he eventually looks and sees, and then when he goes to check after that whole scene, he says, "Oh, Pee-wee's gone. Pee-wee must have become Gamera." And on top of
Well,
that,
when I read
saves
that,
him. In that
when I
scene.
read that when I read that subtitle, I was like,
I think they do allude to that in the America one too, don't they?
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean,
Well, just
it
my
somewhat
brain
explains
went
why he
to
goes like full stop, just stupid. You know?
yeah. Well, my
that,
brain immediately went to
uh,
like Pee Wee Herman becoming Gamera, and I thought about the kaiju filming scene in Pee Wee's Big Adventure. So
I photoshopped his head onto a giant crab not too long ago, a couple of months back.
Yeah, but that's why I was like.
See, Gamera does attack a lighthouse in that scene afterwards, but not out of malice, more out of he's looking for food and he thought that was an energy source.
There you go. Fair enough.
But he ends up saving Toshio. Lord knows why.
David's getting friendly with his turtle over there.
Sing the love song.
Do we need to call PETA or Chris Hansen? I don't know.
No.
That turtle's probably of age. I mean, he looks like a consenting adult.
Yeah. But
You know,
turtles, depending on the species, turtles can live a long, long time.
Yeah.
Say what you want about Toshio. That lighthouse scene is like one of the iconic images of the first movie. So,
Which, and by the way, Gamera appears like immediately. Like it took Godzilla a little bit to get there, and then he just kind of and then he just kind of appears. Like, oh hi, oh is it my cue? Oh okay. As opposed to Gamera, like big fanfare, opening credits. It's like if you're gonna show the monster first thing out of the box instead of building him up, do it like that. Because Godzilla, it was like, oh, did I miss my cue? Okay.
They actually do that shot twice. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, man.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
no. I was just gonna say, Derpy as Gamera does look too a little bit in this, all of them. He looks awesome. Who are we kidding? He's got tusks, okay?
Well, he looks a
but
turtle with tusks that walk on his hind legs. I mean, really.
I
Yeah,
think
it's
you're
awesome.
right.
But they didn't dress him up. They didn't dress up an oven mitt at any
I think
point
it
in
looks
this. They
great.
thankfully learned their lesson from that and
Yeah.
Gojira. It shows up a bit in Godzilla raids again. I noticed that the other day, but thankfully they did away with the oven mitt after that.
Now you'll notice they did use one thing which is weird. It's sort of like you look at it and they do kind of a fake out to where they do like where you turn and then they don't notice it and he comes up behind. They do it twice. I don't know. I can't remember where else they do it in the movie, but they do this twice. And you think,
This
they're going
turtle-
to drag this out. But then they just immediately throw him back in the guy's face, like as soon as he turns around again.
Turtles are known for their stealth.
But he does save Toshio, which is
And
the
their
point.
speed.
And which goes along with the whole thing is Gamera is the friend to all children. That's really where it starts with him. with
Just
him
like
saving
Michael
that
Jackson.
annoying kid.
They test it. Gamera versus
See-
Baragon, there
see-
isn't any kids. So it was like they went away from it a bit, and then that one they also have him on all fours for most of the fight scenes. So
You see, if the kid really was
He's a friend to
psycho,
all children, and he's on all fours.
if the kid really was a psycho, then having him be the first child that this monster befriends seems appropriate, because then it could still be a world destroyer. Just look at who he's befriended, you know?
there you go. It was a cool testing ground for it. I've always taken issue with Toshio just because of his blatant disregard for the safety of others. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Alright.
Especially when you hit like Gamera 3 or 4, excuse me, and it's like Boy Scouts and shit. Like it's a little hard to rectify Toshio just being such a little ass. Like
It's
those Boy
stuck
Scouts
around
didn't
for
put
several of
anybody else
these
at
movies.
risk, you know?
I mean, they joke in Mystery Science Theater, like when the military's setting up like a whole like front, and they said, and I can't remember what they called the kids. I'll just call him Toshio and and that. It's like he gets to go around as like everybody else off limits. Toshio gets to come and go as he pleases.
Pretty much.
Because he just walks over the security lines like nobody's business.
Which again, with the Michael Jackson analogy, it's like those select kids that were given full access to Neverland.
Oh boy.
Getting into a whole can of worms there.
Sure if they tried these freezing bombs on Godzilla, but I thought that was kind of an interesting way to try to put on a monster, freeze bombs.
I think that tonight, Shin
Well, they
Godzilla is the
did
only
that
Godzilla movie where they freeze him, I think.
They did try to freeze him in
Yes.
the
Yeah, that's
in
what
in this one.
they did it knowing that it.
would slow him down.
Are we on Shin Godzilla or Gamera right now?
Gamera.
We're still in
Gamera.
Gamera.
Okay,
Gamera.
because I got a little mixed up there.
Oh, no worries, bud.
It's all right.
I couldn't keep it either.
So I have kind of a history with Gamera. Like I used to watch Godzilla and just various monster movies with my dad, and Gamera was kind of in that rotation. And I personally always found the first Gamera kind of boring because I was so used to Gamera fighting other monsters by the time I had seen it that I think I first saw this first Gamera like 10 years ago, and I was like, what is this? Where's Gurion? Where's Gaio?
I mean, when I was a kid, I was that same way with the first Godzilla or any of the ones where he's the only monster. And but I mean, nowadays I'm kind of used to it. But nonetheless, like if I had my preference, yeah, I'd rather that he fight someone else. But
And
So Dave, where do we go after the whole lighthouse scene? I forgot the rest of that part.
Well,
yeah,
after the lighthouse scene is where we get a series of flying saucers that surface in Japan, and then apparently, which is where the boy lives, Sagami Bay. Toshio he's forced to release his pet turtle, and that's about when Gamera attacks their lighthouse. So after Dr. Hideka returns to Japan, and Kyoko and Oyagi, they accompany the military when Gamera approaches that nuclear plant, that thermonuclear
Sweet
plant.
scene too. Those stacks and him walking by looks so friggin' sick.
And-
Is that
and they have
Professor the Colonel Sanders? Is that the one we're talking about there?
He got
Yeah.
You notice how they happened to move Toshio directly to where Gamera was going? Just like he happened to have an uncle that was a fish seller at the time over there when the lighthouse just happened to be destroyed by Gamera, just so they could have him in that same area.
Yeah,
Just happened.
I unfortunately was unable to view that part, thanks to Amazon losing my copy of the complete collection, which I assume has already been covered.
A little bit.
Briefly.
Oh, briefly, which I'm sure we can mention it throughout.
So Amazon oversold pre-orders for the Gamera Complete Collection from Arrow, which is how a lot of us were planning to watch Gamera for this episode. And well, most of us, I don't think, are actually getting our copies, unfortunately.
Supposedly mine's still on its way Thursday, but I'm not gonna hold too much out for that. Well, we'll see what happens.
I
Well,
would
you did order it
40
early.
DVDs for that.
Oh, they even took people's shit that ordered it and like back when the pre-order first went live, like same day.
When-
There was
When
people
did it
that
go
got-
live?
I don't remember.
I know I ordered mine on April 17th, but I
Yeah,
know
there's people. It was like maybe a month before that or something. I don't know. Something.
I don't think I knew
pre-ordered-
about this.
I pre-ordered
until-
mine in August, so they shouldn't have been taking pre-orders on it at all in August, I don't think.
Oh,
Thankfully, Brandon was able to help me set it up. Where now I'll only have Arrow to blame if I don't get mine. So at least
Oh.
Yeah.
that's out the middle,
that
man. You
works.
know?
Nice.
you can blame the distributor itself at this point.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I had it in my hands a couple times at a local place where I buy my stuff, but it's like, oh, I have one coming from Amazon. And then today, or yesterday, I called. It's like, hey, can you guys hold that for me? It's like, oh, if somebody bought it. It's like, I see.
It was actually on the shelf there.
I had to
I took pictures
I
of
had
it.
to cancel my pre-order just because of. I had to cancel my pre-order just because I had to penny pinch with unemployment and everything. That being said, I do intend to get it once I am able, because something I hate having to do that, but at the same time, you got to do what you got to do.
It was a very
That's-
expensive set. The only reason I bought it from Amazon was because I signed up for the Amazon credit card and I got a $100 gift
yeah.
card. So it cost me. Technically like $32.
Well, if you
So,
Oh, it's a thing of beauty.
well,
though.
it
It's really-
if you do the
That is
pre, because
amazing.
I have Prime, I have.
It is, Brett.
yeah,
It is
I
a
want
big-
Prime too.
Well, but like I have
brand
Amazon.
a lot of money for it. I'm gonna give you a little extra too for hooking it up, bro.
Actually,
Um,
I'll tell you one thing else about the set that's interesting, and this is attached to our movie, our main event, Shin Godzilla. Matter of fact, Matt Frank was heavily involved in the art design and release of this set, especially in the America. Matter of fact, I think the comics are by him. He actually has been known as an up-and-coming Godzilla artist. And I think he did some art on the Godzilla set. I can't remember
Yep,
whether he
he's
did or
done
not.
quite a bit on
And-
what is it? That whole battle arc with there's like 40 kaijus or something that went in it. I think it's IDW or
Yeah.
one of those guys doing it.
And he's even actually gotten his Godzilla comics published in Japan. And to get an American to be well liked in Japan for publishing Godzilla comic books, that's pretty impressive right there.
Seems like he goes nuts with
Yeah,
it,
that's
man.
kind of a big deal right
Oh,
there.
There's
He's a
some stuff
Godzilla
Toho
nut.
has to make him. Toho makes him pump the brakes on some of it because he tries to get a little wild, which I respect. You know.
He's a Godzilla nut. I mean, I listen to him on Rage Select a lot because he'll come on and co-host occasionally with the main guy there, and he is like the god. He'll constantly go back to Godzilla in his conversations whenever he's on.
I try to make a point to do that myself.
Well,
Yeah.
the only
I
thing
just,
I remember,
In there.
There was a
Go ahead, Dustin.
oh,
You haven't
I was
had a
just
chance to speak up.
I was just saying the main things I remember about the first Gamera movie, aside from that childhood disappointment, is the crazy way that they quote unquote defeat Gamera in the end.
Plan
Like,
Z.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
I don't know
I love that.
I don't know how close we are to that, but
Just about there, I think, almost. I mean, we're like at
When,
the power reactor scene, eh?
I remember
Because-
Gamera like
I mentioned
saved the
it.
falling child for some reason.
Oh, yeah. I relive that every
Yeah.
time I have nightmares about that
It
shit.
was
I
Gamera's
gotta-
mistake.
I got to
Well,
admit,
we were
Plan
making
Z-
the joke that. Go
Well,
ahead.
Gamera is the kid friendly monster.
yeah,
That's why.
you got to admit, Plan Z is a very, very 60s sounding.
It is.
Oh.
And the execution of it is very, very 60s, too.
It
I
is.
mean,
Works
they
out
made
about
fun
as
of
well
that
as you'd expect.
in
Where-
Rugrats. If you ever watch like the Rugrats cartoon on Nickelodeon, they had the giant monster for that one. I can't remember his
Reptar.
Reptar. And they even have the thing where
Shit.
Reptar is like shot into space, but he's driving the spaceship as he's going.
Well, considering the places that the Gamera franchise
we're-
goes to, it's like, sure, why not?
Well, they never really have to defeat him
Well,
in
we,
future ones, you know?
Well,
you know what
Dustin,
I
we were
mean.
making the joke that basically Gamera is basically like the Michael Jackson of kaiju.
Whoa, now.
So, well, he was. Well, I don't know. I mean, you can't really tell he was touching a kid as he was holding it down. But,
They mostly ride on his back, and he can't reach back there. It's been proven.
Yeah.
They actually put that to the test in this.
Well, I mean, he had to.
Yeah,
mostly-
they tried that method where turtle being on its back, it can't really.
Yeah, they do the whole thing. It's like, isn't that
Yeah.
after they hit him with the ice bombs, or is that before?
And they make
That was-
an dramatic thing too,
Yeah.
because they're like setting it up for you, like oh, but it won't be able to do anything, and then of course
No.
Gamera pulls in his shit, and he becomes the flying saucer again. So
So
What
he ends
happened?
up.
Which well,
I think that
here's the question though. Here's the question. So like they flip him on his back, and assuming that he let's
he's a
say he
turtle.
couldn't fly. How long were they planning on waiting? And like, couldn't they just
let
like
him
I
starve
don't know
for
what like
about 5
ram
minutes. Yeah, they said they're
some
gonna let
kind of
him
sharp
starve.
object through his belly?
They
Yeah,
do
they're
it
just
in
gonna let him
the
starve.
Yeah,
they're
but
just
that's
gonna
what
let
I
him
mean, like,
starve.
how
I took
long were
issue
they
with
wanting
that
to
in my
wait?
review for the American one. Like, as long as it takes. Yeah, they're just
That's a
leaving there.
cruel way to do it. Really,
It
I
is.
mean,
It's fucked up. I thought that was pretty messed up. I mean,
Yeah, but it's like
like
that
I
could
said,
be, but that could be, yeah, that could be weeks, months, years, anything. They
yeah, it's
don't know.
horrifying. You know, the whole entire prospect of it is just horrifying. At least drop a nuke on them then at that point or something. But well, that wouldn't work. But do something.
Well,
So-
most turtles can like
Yeah.
take care of that. Like most turtles have a way to get up, have a way to flip themselves. They use their
True.
neck.
If you've ever owned one, you'll figure that out real quick.
yeah.
They're definitely not that helpless. At
They
least most.
stick their legs. They stick their legs in their shell. Then the fire bursts out. They turn around.
Dude, my little Tarpon used to do kind of a Gamera thing. Like he'd spin
Oh,
his feet
yeah.
until he eventually like spun a little bit to get up on one side, kind of, and then he would just naturally flip over. You know.
They just pop their necks out and flip themselves.
There you go.
A couple of flicks.
Those are those buff turtles. Those like those Shaolin monks that crush the apples with their chins. That's awesome.
Well, like
Because
some
we're-
turtles have very long and muscular necks. I mean, like snapping turtles would probably do that easy, you know?
Yeah, and they
So-
are a thick turtle.
yeah.
Definitely.
Because we're running along, we should. Do you mind if I help y'all fast forward through the plot a little bit?
Sure.
Jam on it, bro.
I mean, Gamera really has a couple of
Go ahead.
attacks. One, he attacks one of the power plants in the main city, and then we have the big old train scene where, which is another attack where they're feeding him all these trains filled with fuel. They try to trap Gamera out at sea with a typhoon and a volcano. And because of some weird loose connection to the doctor, Toshio worms his way into every single one of these scenes.
Yes.
As they make the joke in Mystery Science Theater, oh yes, Toshio gets to come and go whenever he pleases. That's but that's sadly, I mean, Toshio actually manages to move across country on his own.
Some bitch is harder to get rid of than the friggin' giant turtle.
But eventually they come up with Plan Z, which is shoot Gamera into space. They lure him into this hole, and then they have a spaceship appear around him, and they shoot him off into orbit. And that's the Reader's Digest version of the rest of the story.
Yeah, I forget if this one ends with Sayonara or Gamera as he's flying into space, but that's how the American one ends.
Toshio was one of the screenwriters' kids who just so happened to have a pet turtle, and they just let him flow with his words. And he
That's
just
true, because I don't want to have a reason to hate it more, dude. Like, is that real?
They do that kind of Beatles cover of Gamera, like Gamera. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, that Gamera.
So they don't do the other theme until the next one, until Gamera. Well, I think until the second film.
Do they? I don't think that they have that in Baragon because there's no kids and there's really no like.
Maybe it's Gaios or it's the one with the.
I think it's Gauss.
Yeah, Gauss. Yeah.
Gauss or Giran.
Do the cutesy theme that pretty much becomes Gamera's theme for a while after
Shit
that.
slaps. Like, it's a worthy theme song for sure. It's right there with the Mothra song for me.
But out of the plot, I figured this would be the best time to say is like, is there anything out of the plot that we need to look at that was?
This
not
has a
really all
plot.
that much. It's just the natural disasters just keep fucking shit up, for their Z plan,
Doesn't their camp catch on fire at one point when they're trying to lead in the opposite direction or something like that? I'm surprised Tokyo didn't cause that shit.
They
typhoon.
couldn't predict a typhoon hitting, which is kind of like.
And then, of course, a
It's
volcano
on the same day.
a volcano erupts same day, so it's like they try to coincide some of these volcanic eruptions with this shit too, So.
Well, that always happens in kaiju movies, though. There's like some unforeseen element that no one could have, predict. Well, they could, but no one could predict it or prevent it, and it just screws the whole plan up. That happens several times in kaiju movies I've just seen recently. It's convenient how that shit happens like that.
In all fairness, though, to give Gamera some credit, Gamera is very different from Godzilla in how he goes about it. I feel like Gamera has more of a, what's the word? I think Gamera actually has more focused attacks. He knows where he wants to go. He goes there, he hits it. He doesn't go through big populous areas. He just goes straight for the fuel dumps and straight for the volcanoes or whatever to get his stuff. But he's not going through huge residential centers. You don't see Gamera running through Tokyo destroying all the buildings and stuff. He's destroying like warehouse districts and generator areas. He destroys a train, but it's a fuel train that Toshio jumps on as it's heading into Gamera's mouth. Which, again,
Well, and then of course we have an ending where it's kind of Looney Toony, where they just end up like shooting him off into outer space.
They wait for him to step on a rocket platform and then shoot him into space. Not making that up. That's their Gamera solution.
And he lands on Mars, and Marvin the Martian gets very pissed off.
actually, Mo, what did you think about that last that Z plan?
Who?
Oh, Mo just disappeared.
Mo seems to be having technical difficulties.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I've had assorted disconnections tonight. Not sure why. I'm here though. Apologies.
Oh, so how was the how? What did you think of the Z plan? I mean,
Oh well, it
you've seen a
works.
lot of kaiju stuff, so I was thinking, what would be your like take on the Z
Was
plans?
was
Well,
this
shit like that, you know, he's going to end up on some other planet controlled by something and sent back to Earth, or he's just going to run into a friggin' meteor like Gamera does in Gamera 2, and he just ends up coming immediately back down and destroying a dam. So it works. It's cool. I like the imagery of him getting like encased in the capsule, and then they fire him off. And for some reason, the Sayonara Gamera thing just makes me laugh my ass off like every time that I've seen it. So that'll always be a favorite moment in the franchise.
If they had a Plan Z in a movie today, it would have to involve zombies. Now imagine if they unleashed a horde of zombies and made them eat the kaiju.
Well, there you go.
There we go.
That'd
World
be a
War
different
Z
kind of
versus
Z plan
Gamera.
right there.
I don't know.
There you go.
I feel like Gamera could make short work of some hordes of zombies. You know, he is a turtle too, so he could just turtle up.
There still needs to be a Gamera versus Godzilla.
I don't know. The whole, I mean,
Yeah, there
Gamera
really
is a very much like
That people have wanted that for so long. Like, I don't think it's ever gonna happen.
it did
Well,
happen.
Twister Teeth did a death battle.
Interestingly enough, at whatever World Fair was in Japan back in the days, I don't really like know the history of the World Fairs, but there was one there back in the day, and they had a live stage show of Gamera versus Godzilla, proper dudes in suits and miniatures and stuff, I guess, and that's the closest we've ever got. And I think that was
corrected.
yeah. If there's footage of that out there somewhere, please let us know. I've drunk Googled it a couple times, but that's about it.
Anybody have anything to say about the special effects? Those were pretty fun.
Special effects actually work fairly well.
Gamera looked pretty.
They're about as good as the effects in Godzilla.
Yep, the early ones, you know, for sure. I especially like the scene with the nuclear stacks, like I was saying earlier. Those big,
Oh yeah.
what the hell they call those things, but they look cool. And him lumbering around behind him, like that scene of the movie, still always pumps me up for some reason.
I think one of the things that I was somewhat laughing at is because the transfer that Mill Creek has is it has automatic like subtitles on it, but when the English happens, they got Japanese subtitles. So it was
Oh
like,
yeah, they put them off to the side. Yeah.
That's always the deal in kaiju movies. Like I just reviewed Godzilla versus Biollante after watching it like the 4th time, and there is a ton of unnecessarily English spoken by people that it's probably not their first language, and it's just good stuff, and it's all subtitled in Japanese as if we can understand it either.
I like how they would actually work together with the Gamera thing. I mean, there was one where they were talking about like the suit would get so heavy that some of the people couldn't move, so they just tag team out and put somebody else in the suit. That's like kind of cool watching that sort of thing. Though I even love the fact that they were just pulling like random Americans from like hotels and military bases. It just
it's great. It gives it a crazy quality too, of just like you said, calling them actors is probably not accurate. You know? They are just people in a giant turtle movie, and I respect them for it. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, some of the best scenes involve those so-called actors.
Oh, they're funny. They're hilarious.
Yes, they are.
Well, and just in terms of the Gamera suit itself, it looks consistent. That's, you know, because it is consistent through the movie. That's one thing this has up on Gojira, is that there's a very consistent, it's just solid special effects. There's no oven mitts. There's no weird, like, you know, random parts where he just doesn't look like the same creature. Continuity wise, in terms of the way the monster looks, it's big. Yeah, they do a scale be damned thing a couple of times, like most early kaiju movies do, but can't be helped.
well, I guess one thing I'd like to say, I guess in 1985, evidently the American distribution rights to the Gamera films were bought by a producer by the name of Sandy Frank, who distributed 5 of the 8 films with new English dubbing.
Some sweet friggin' VHS covers too. Love them.
I have Gamera versus Gaios from that. We taped Gamera versus Gurion off TV. I don't think I ever got to see the other ones, which is why I was so excited for that box set.
I think it's Virus they made with the Boy Scouts of America and the Boy Scouts of Japan. So it's just like all Boy Scout kids in the movie. It's nuts.
Neat.
It's great though.
I have a DVD of. Actually, I wasn't sure if the version we were watching was different. I have a DVD where it's just called Gamera the Invincible, and I wasn't sure if that was the.
I believe that's the
thing.
American one. It's like Brandon touched on at the beginning, though. That it's whereas with Gojira, there's probably more differences. Well, there definitely is more differences between Gojira and Godzilla than there is between this, like the giant monster and the Invincible. They're basically the same movie for all intents.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if the dubbing.
Oh no, yeah, it's going to be American in that one, I believe.
Mhm.
I wanted to make sure I watched the right version. So.
Yep.
That's
So
right.
ultimately, did we talk about the music of this film?
I like the sound Gamera makes. That's my music.
Yeah, I feel that. Put that like some whale sounds on one of those like alarm clocks and I'll fall asleep.
You know, that was actually something I was actually gonna ask about that, because Gamera's cry reminded me a little bit of like an organic equivalent of like what the TIE fighters sound like. If that was like a more mechanical version, but like if you listen to those back to back, there's some definite similarities.
Of the which what now? I missed what he said.
Gamera's cry.
But what is it supposed to sound similar to?
The TIE fighter.
Gamera's cry sounds like
Oh,
it sounds similar to a TIE fighter.
But made by an organic sword.
Like listen to them back to back.
yeah, I'll have to,
Yeah.
I'll have to do that, dude. That's I'm intrigued.
Well, the music was
Yeah, listen to them back to back, and I think you'll notice.
the music was done by Tadashi Yamauchi, and he also did Gamma versus Gaiago as well. Down the
Wait, what?
Gaios.
It's Gauss, bro.
That's
Yeah, get it right.
No, I think he did a couple later too, didn't he? I don't remember. There's like a weird order to the directors in Gamera, kind of like Godzilla. Actually, there's like that dude that did as many or more, actually, I think, than Honda did, but they're spaced out. You know, like there's some periods where he wasn't doing them and shit. The music is dope though for what it is. I mean, that song by the Moons, though, the Gamera song, I believe that's the band that did it, is called the Moons. That shit is instant classic. You know, you hear that and it's hard not want to do some like crazy like under the sea dance moves and just vibe out to that Gamera shit. You know.
They're also pretty well. They were actually pretty well known at the time. They did pretty good musically. I think they won some awards, got some recognition. They're pretty high rated.
So we didn't get the Beatles, Dane, but we got the Moons.
Hell yeah.
So I think, is there anything
I
else?
mean, you gotta do what you gotta do.
I guess favorite scenes.
Okay. What about you, Brandon? What are some of your favorite scenes?
I don't know what it is, but I just love the scene where Gamera's just like eating the fuel line cars from the train one by one. And you got Toshio, like, I think it's a good idea. I'll get Gamera's attention since he's eating these cars by getting on top of them.
They should have put him in one. He wants to be in every scene. There you go, bro.
Which is just hilarious in the annoyance. I actually was saying that I thought when I watched Gamera the Invincible that they had just made him annoying on purpose, and he wasn't probably annoying in the Japanese. Well, I was wrong.
Dude, I've been wrong about that more often than not, because I've been comparing the dubs and the subs on the Heisei Godzilla series, and it is surprisingly accurate in some of those shitty dubs, man. I'm almost a little ashamed on their behalf for some of that stuff.
And I will admit, if I was to say one thing about Gamera that I will take away that was very different from Godzilla, it's that I have been surprised at how much that Gamera the Invincible got of the spirit of the original Gamera the Giant Monster.
Yeah, they nailed it. I mean, it's I did a review on that, so you guys, that's one of the rare ones. Well, Dai doesn't care, so any of my Gamera reviews just get left on YouTube. You don't have to redirect those. So pop over, check it out. I reviewed the American one, and it's going to just reflect everything we said here, because it is basically the same movie. Gamera is a bit more versatile than Godzilla. When you watch through it as a series, they do the silly kid stuff, but they do it in a way that's actually endearing and not one of those things that makes you kind of fucking embarrassed to even be watching it, and that's the thing that I think they dialed in the most. Because there's always going to be that Godzilla Gamera comparison. There's never any escaping it, and in my mind, Dai kept it tighter, and they condensed the stuff they knew they wanted the character to have into the movies. And they did the same thing with the Heisei trilogy of Gamera. They didn't go overboard with it. They didn't do 6 or 8 movies. They did 3. And they're widely regarded as like some of the best kaiju movies that you can ever see. And honestly, when I compare a lot of the later Gamera movies to other Showa kaiju flicks, they stand up still. Like Gamera versus Gauss or Virus, or even the one with the friggin' mechanical shark. I forget the Zigra. Like that shit's still pretty good. Some of those other ones don't hold up. So Gamera has longevity because they didn't beat the dead horse with it. There's 8 movies, and then there's 3, and then a failed reboot.
They actually had a.
I don't know if I'd say failed. I rather enjoy Gamera the Brave.
Not seen it
did
yet,
have
bro.
a like storyboards of the Gamera film that never was. One that they were planning on him fighting a giant snake. And that Gamera would have like an intense battle with this snake, and it would poison him. And you get to see the storyboards of him doing it, beating the snake, and then rescuing the snake's children, though, because the children are innocent. And Gamera protects even like the children of the giant monster.
No precedent for that in the series, by the way. That's out of left field, but I'll take it.
Well, I thought the Heisei Gameras were pretty rad.
No, they're great, dude.
Guardian of the Universe.
Sadly, good.
I actually enjoy Gamera more than I do Godzilla, to be honest.
Most days, I'm in the same camp, man.
Which is why it kind of surprises me that Godzilla outweighs Gamera, at least as far as the mainstream goes, because Gamera is a hell of a lot more likable. And
for his respective periods in the movies we got, Godzilla got crazy with it, and that's what I'll always love about that shit, So,
Godzilla got on acid at
various points, yes, but it was like a good trip for sure.
We got off point again. Favorite scenes.
Yeah, favorite scenes. Go for it.
I would have to say my favorite scene is when they suggest to let's put him on his back and see what he does.
Sick bastard. What is wrong with you? What the hell's wrong with you? As a turtle lover, I find that reprehensible, and you
same here. What the F?
I love the fact that he just pulls in his arms and legs and he shoots off,
Oh, okay. That is a cool reveal that he's the one that's been
he can fly like that.
We knew it. They should have probably made the UFO parts look more UFO-ish so that we didn't know.
They just put him on his back, and then he does that, and they're like, "Oh,
yeah, it's a cool reveal for sure." I feel that. Man. I retract my statement.
For
what
me,
about you? Or you go ahead.
For me, it's probably a tie between the 2 scenes I remember the most. Like when Gamera first appears, like we just see it. Like there's no like dramatic lead up or reveal or anything. It's just like, I'm here. I'm a big turtle. Surprise. Which I kind of enjoy that moment. But I think my favorite is still just the preposterous ending of this movie. It's like commence Plan Z in hope that he steps on the rocket platform.
Right.
And then that thing closes, and there's a long countdown. And it's like, can't he smash his way out of that? Like, why is this taking so long?
Gamera smash.
In the coyote from Looney Tunes, trying to make sure that the Roadrunner would go on this platform to shoot him off.
Well, they had the Ring of Fire, and Gamera's attracted to that stuff, so somewhat plausible.
Still.
don't know why he wouldn't just be sucking on a fire jet and instead steps in the middle of it. But suspension of disbelief, kids.
Hey,
Yeah.
Gamera wanted to be a rock star, and he was getting on the stage. He was just like getting ready to rock out.
Yeah.
What
Someone's
was
gonna open for the Beatles.
what would your favorite scene be, Dane?
Probably that scene in the rock club, because I like that the kids are just like, woo, party. And I don't know what it was, but that scene kind of cemented that in my brain. Like, oh, that would be so cool if they could have merged the Beatles into this thing when they're performing at Budokan. I don't know. Just that scene, it was funny in and of itself, but like the scene that it made me imagine in my head, is really funny.
It was great too because they're like, "Woo, let's just forget that. Let's rock on." And then he starts attacking, and they're, "We immediately regret this decision." Like
Did you hear Gamera's coming?
Exactly.
Jake, if there was a moment that you could take from this film, what would it be?
Honestly, my memory of most of the film is too hazy for a solid single moment. I'm going to probably go generally with any moment that the acting made me laugh, because there were many. Just the scenes with the military, with the American military, the scenes with Professor Hidaka. He was actually decent, but that just made it funnier because he was perfectly decent and everyone around him was not. It was like
He was the only one trying.
Dude, the Japanese Colonel Sanders scientists are close to my heart because there's a lot of them in kaiju movies.
Right.
There's several of them in the Gamera movies, from what I remember. Right? But there are several in other kaiju movies that look just like Colonel Sanders, and I can't get over it. I love it so much.
Yeah, it's good times. And
I'm a chicken scientist. That's what,
I will admit, I must have blocked some of the Toshio scenes from my brain.
That's the healthy reaction to that stuff.
Was he really that
Jacob's
bad?
actually
I
a
mean,
Toshio fan.
Toshio sucks, bro. He almost kills that poor train conductor. That
The
kid.
kid's Jake's favorite movie character.
I would have, if I was Gamera, instead of catching him, I'd have swatted him like a piece of gum when he was falling from that friggin' lighthouse. Just forget it.
Alrighty. I think that's that about wraps that up. So did we want to save our credits for the second film, or?
I certainly do.
yeah.
The
I'll
only
say
thing
Yeah,
I
let's
want to
do
do
that.
is do my normal shout out to the people who are in our voting groups, especially considering as we'll be doing our big reveal next episode. So at this so be sure to tune into Shin Godzilla if you want to know what we're covering for anything. What was it? Not Anything Goes. It was Free for All Fall. So, but we'll be bringing our episodes, our kaiju combat to a close as Shin Godzilla. And we want to thank Anime Collectors Incorporated, Movies Domain, Moe's Tavern, and gosh, there was another one there. Talk Movies with us for participating in these. And if you're on Facebook and you come across these, they're lovely communities. You should join them and be a part of them. And of course, Inside Movies Galore, we need to revive that community.
Alrighty.
I post in the community tab sometimes, I think. Before we go, I do want to point out, if you missed the Arrow set, all hope is not lost. You got your DVD 11 film collection here. You can get this used for who knows how cheap. Dave got it for $8. It was actually brand new when he got it. And you can, it goes for like 30 or 35 online. So there's many possibilities with that. As Dane and these guys pointed out earlier, they do also, I think Mill Creek also has the Blu-ray like packs of them. So there's 2 volumes for the Showa period, a volume for the Heisei period, and Gamera the Brave isn't super expensive. So while you don't get all of the special features, you can still relatively easily get yourself these Gamera movies. So
I do have the Heisei trilogy Blu-ray.
very nice.
Heck yeah.
Arguably the best ones to have. But
next
I would agree.
next year on the channel, we will
Next year.
be discussing Shin Godzilla. So stay tuned for that, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for listening to us. Definitely like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see y'all later.
All right.
Care.